Welcome to the channel. This is Clarityempress, the Empress of Clarity. Here to bring you a collective energy reading for my Clarityempress collective. I hope everybody's doing well. Please like, share, and subscribe. Alright, class is in session tonight with your professor. Let me get it together. Hold on, y'all. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Aya! How are you, my dear? What's going on with you? Class is in session. We get ready to get started. And I love the hearts. Thank you. What you mean connect to the internet? Okay. Peace. Alright, I'm just typing. I'm trying to get to the script. Let me see. Okay, alright, I found it. Let me just skip all that part. Pause. Transcript. That's not the transcript. Here we go. So you say you're good. I'm good too. I just eat. I don't know about no celebration. We just eat. We just celebrate. Everybody home. Everybody off. Everybody's home. And we can enjoy ourselves quietly, lovingly, enjoy some good food while we at it. You know what I'm saying? That's it and that's all. Alright, let me get my stand together. That is it and that's all. Do you celebrate? Alright, so welcome to the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell. That way you notify anytime I come on. Tonight the topic. They thought you was naive, but they didn't realize that you were just observing them the entire time. You know, sometimes we get into relationships that we think that there's something we have to do, but sometimes it's a time to pause and be still and just observe, right? That way you know whatever decision you make about that situation, you're making the right decision. Sometimes you got to compare and contrast the situation. You got to test some things out. Make sure you see what you saw. You know what I'm saying? Oh, okay. I know that's right. Make it cozy for both of y'all. Yeah, food allergies are no joke. I had a little girl. She couldn't eat nothing that her mom didn't make. Her food allergies were that severe. She's bony like olive oil because she could only eat what her mother made. And she couldn't have onions and garlics and nuts and you name it. I was like, oh my gosh, she could have protein. She could have meat. It was so much she couldn't eat. It was crazy. And I try to see if she's growing out of it. She still ain't growing out of it. She's 12. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I understand to a degree. All right. So class is in session. 60. And she's allergic to protein. Oh, poor baby. She must be a little skinny mini. I wonder where that comes from. That's crazy. That's a lot. That your body rejects, you know? Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Because at some point, you know, a lot of times the only thing some kids, I have a nephew, the only thing he can eat whatever came out the ground. Like it had to come out the ground. Like I think organic foods, but outside of that, his body rejects a lot. And my sister, who didn't want to breastfeed, ended up having no choice but to breastfeed. She became a cow. She had enough breast milk to give away. She didn't even want to do it, but she had to. The doctor was like, "You can't give him anything else." Yeah. You know, interesting. You say evolution. I don't know about evolution because now they're saying peanut allergies are down. So there's something that triggers allergies. I don't think it's evolution. It could be them vaccines. It may not be. It's something environmental that creates it, I think. But anyway, here we go. All right, let's start the session. Let's start class. Everybody who's coming to class today, our TA is like slash our moderator is here. If you have a question, any assistance, she will indicate to me what you need. You know, if you have questions, you may go to her. All right, we're gonna treat this like college, a college course 101. Okay. So this also comes from one of them videos, but I feel like it's a very important topic to cover as we process the people that we've been dealing with that got that funny style behavior. But we have to come to a point where you surrender to it, to the connection. And I don't mean surrender in a you give up yourself to a connection, but you surrender the thought or the potential or the, you know what I'm saying, it's going to be more than what it is. You got to surrender to the point where you have to acknowledge the relationships that you have with people. And I don't mean just romantic, I just mean relationships in general. That how people show up is who they are. Katana, what's up, girl? That's what you have to recognize. That's what you surrender to. Not, don't make it what it's not. You know, behavior and words might be different. Pay attention to behavior. And you know, this is about observing, listening, maybe testing your hypothesis to make sure you're right. So I'm going to read the script. I'm going to inflect some things as we go along, but again, feel free to join me in the comments. Okay, but class is in session. Okay, so there comes a moment in the dynamic between an avoidant person and someone who has been patiently enduring their patterns. When the avoidant person suddenly realizes that something fundamentally shifts their perception of the entire relationship. Okay, let me pull cards while I'm doing this. Hold on, y'all. All right, Spirit, tell me what they need to know and be aware of while I am reading these. Tell me more, Spirit. So what it is they realize that you were never naive, clueless, or an overly trusting person that they believed you to be. You weren't missing their inconsistencies, their mixed signals, their strategic withdrawals, their manipulation disguised as boundaries. You saw everything and you noticed every pattern. Tell me more, Spirit. Oh, gosh. Give me a card. Okay. Yeah, tricks up their sleeve. Woo! So, you know, avoided people have a lot of tricks up their sleeve to avoid relationships, to avoid deepening of a commitment or a situation or whatever, you know, or their feelings. They just mainly are avoiding their feelings. Yep. It's the spiritual babe with some tricks up his sleeve. Tell me more, Spirit. What Spirit is also telling me is that this person, either they're trying to um, turn a new leaf, or they're trying to appear to. Tell me more, Spirit. Ooh, but they blocked and banned. This might be somebody in your life you like, you know what? You're done. We're over. Tell me more, Spirit. Tell me more. Oh, yeah. I think you cut the cord with this person. Oh, yeah. And this is how they feel right now, that you left them hanging, but you literally cut the cord with this person because they had too many lies, too many tricks up their sleeve. Yep. They can't come near you without a transformation. Not even to say hello, not even for you to friend zone them. All right, let's keep it moving. You weren't missing there. Okay, wait. You saw everything. You noticed every pattern, recognized every defense mechanism, understood exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. But instead of calling them out constantly, instead of creating drama or demanding explanations for every withdrawal, instead of pursuing them desperately when they pull back, you chose to observe. You chose to give them space to reveal themselves fully while you gathered information, processed what you were seeing, and made your own quiet assessment about whether this person and this dynamic was sustainable or worth your continued investment. Um, this realization is profoundly unsettling for the avoided person because it means they never had the control or advantage. They believe they never had the control or advantage that they believed they had. It means their patterns were transparent rather than mysterious. It means you were making informed choices to stay or tolerate their behavior rather than being too naive to see alternatives. It means they underestimated you completely, mistaking your patience and strategic non reaction for ignorance or excessive tolerance. You know, some people feel that they have so many tricks up their sleeve and that they are so cunning that you're just falling for their magical tricks. Because a lot of people think they got this magic sauce, and anybody that tolerates them for any amount of time, they must be into me. They must, you know what I mean? They must be my dummy. That's what I call a lot of people when they say that. They think you're stupid, that you didn't get it. But you can't always reveal your hand with people. So a lot of times when you're assessing, do I want to tolerate this? Or are they really going to come through like they said they would? You basically, excuse me, realize something about this person, but you observe them quietly. Okay. Um, and you transform. I feel like this changed you. Even if it changed them, it definitely changed you. He said, okay, so they said the avoided person builds their entire approach to the relationship on the assumption that you didn't fully understand what was happening, that they were operating at a level of sophistication you couldn't perceive, tricks up their sleeve, that their fences were subtle enough to escape your notice, discovering that you saw through everything, that you were consciously choosing your responses rather than reacting from ignorance, forces them to reevaluate the entire relationship and their role in it. They realized that every time they thought they were successful creating distance or maintaining control, you were allowing it while taking mental notes. I like people to tell me, show me who you are and where you rather be. What, friend, foe, whatever. I like you to tell me that. I want you to show me that. You know why? Because I'm going to be able to sit back and just watch you. I have walked away from so many friendships or whatever, I guess, situationships quietly. I remember I put these two women back together as friends. They were beefing. But there was something very, not just cunning, but low vibrational about the one I initiated a friendship with, that I backed off after I put them together, made them talk, and they worked it out. I backed off quietly. I had nothing else to say. She didn't pursue me. I didn't pursue her as far as friends is concerned. I just let that go. And I realized it's not for me. And then I found out a lot of things afterwards that confirmed that I did the right thing by backing off. But I observed how it was going and I was like, yeah, nah, mm-mm, mm-mm. So we're going to keep this going. They realized that the relationship continued not because you were too attached to recognize dysfunction, but because you were giving them enough rope to either change or hang themselves with their own patterns. When you were what you were actually doing, while they thought you were clueless, while the avoided person believed you were naive or simply didn't notice their patterns, you were actually engaged in a sophisticated process of observation, assessment, and strategic response that they completely misread as ignorance or excessive tolerance. You weren't doing the work that emotionally intelligent, I'm sorry, you were doing the work that emotionally intelligent people do in relationships with complex dynamics, gathering data, testing hypotheses. Remember, I mentioned that earlier. Noting patterns and making informed decisions about how much to invest and how long to stay based on comprehensive understanding, rather than on a blind hope or attachment driven denial. The avoided person's assumption that you didn't see what was happening reveals more about their own defense and their need to believe that they were in control rather than reveal about your actual awareness. Then it reveals. What you were doing while they thought you were clueless was noticing everything. You noticed when their enthusiasm would surge and then suddenly evaporate without explanation. You noticed the pattern of them pursuing when you pulled back and withdrawing when you showed interest. You notice how they would be warm and engaged one day and cold and distant the next, with no apparent external reason for the shift. You notice how they spoke about the past relationship with a consistent theme of others being too needy or too demanding. You notice how they maintain escape routes in the conversation about the future, always hedging, always keeping things ambiguous. When you try to make a plan with somebody and they say, yeah, but they're not really confirming with you. And then the day comes and the plans are supposed to take flight and these people disappear. You notice how they frame their limitations as preferences and their avoidance as healthy boundaries. You were noticing these patterns not in an explosive, reactive way the avoided person might have expected if they knew you were aware, but in quiet, accumulating way that creates comprehensive understanding. You were building a mental map of their defensive structure, seeing how the pieces fit together, recognizing the underlying wounds that drove their behavior. You were reading psychology articles about the attachment theory, recognizing their patterns and descriptions of avoidant attachment. Understanding that what you were experiencing was not unique to your relationship, but rather a well documented phenomenon with predictable trajectories. What what you were also doing was testing their patterns to see if your observations were accurate. You will occasionally pull back to see if they would pursue, confirming the dynamic where your unavailability triggered their interest. You would express a need to see if they would meet it or if they would withdraw, confirming their limited capacity for responding to others' needs. You would create opportunities for them to show up more fully to see if they would take those opportunities or if they would retreat from them. Listen, I I'm not the I don't know if that was a natural thing, but intentionally I don't never really fall back just for the sake of will they pursue. If I fall back it's because I ain't got nothing to say, right? But I will give you an opportunity to show up. I definitely will, especially if I'm a little suspect. And when you don't show up or you don't, you know what I'm saying, complete the mission. Hmm. Anyway. Okay, wait a minute. These tests weren't manipulative games. Yeah, exactly. They were data gathering exercises that help you understand whether the patterns you were seeing were consistent and therefore likely to continue, or whether they were temporary reactions to specific circumstances that might change. While gathering this data, you were also managing your own emotional responses with considerable sophistication. You recognize that reacting to every withdrawal with anxiety or pursuit would only reinforce their patterns, give them justification for their belief that you are too needy or too demanding. You understood that constant confrontation about their inconsistency would trigger their defense and likely accelerate their exit rather than creating meaningful change. Excuse me. So you chose strategic non-reaction, responding to their patterns with measured calm that gave you time to think clearly about what you were seeing, rather than reacting from a wounded attachment. This non-reaction was not the same as acceptance or approval of their behavior. You are not okay with their patterns, but you recognize that showing them you weren't okay in a reactive, emotional way would not produce the outcomes you wanted. Either they would use your emotional reactions to justify their withdrawal, framing you as too intense or unstable, or they would provide temporary reassurance that wouldn't translate to sustained behavioral change. So you chose a different approach, allowing their patterns to play out fully while you observe, neither rewarding the pattern with pursuit nor punishing them with drama. Simply noting that simply noting what was happening and what it revealed about their capacity. I'm pausing for here, right here. Sometimes when you're observing people in this type of situation, it's like that hangman energy. You really get to see, like, wow, they won't show up for me. Oh, it's a holiday and I like holidays. They're not gonna give me a holiday. They're not gonna show up. You know what I'm saying? Or they're gonna pick a fight, or they're gonna be distant, or they're gonna have another priority. Those type of things. Um, I don't know if they touch upon it on this video, but it was another one I heard and I want to show y'all. And they talked about how the avoided people will try to trigger your emotions when they go distance, right? So when they go distant, and you don't react because now you are in that observation mode. They may not understand what you see, but their hope is that they can restore control by triggering you. So they'll do some insidious shit just to see how you respond. I had somebody do that to me to see how I would respond. They did some shit, waited a day or two, tried to make sure that I saw the shit that they did. And some real passive aggressive, because only I would know. With I guess the hopes of me responding, I don't know, but I saw it and I'm not fazed by that. But that's also how I knew that I was growing, because I didn't really care. It was just, why are you trying so hard to trigger me? You know what I'm saying? Why would you try to set me up in a way for me to respond to you instead of fucking just talking? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, all right. Okay, so what you were also doing during this observation period was maintaining your sense of self and your connection to your own reality. The avoided person's behavior could have made you doubt your perceptions, convince you that you were reading too much into things or being too sensitive and expecting too much. This is what they would have, like, so if I had confronted this person, they would have tried to say, oh no, I wasn't doing that. I wouldn't have done, you just reading that too much. I think you jealous, or I think you did. Yeah, I'm not giving nobody the satisfaction of even thinking that, because I wasn't. But I peeped what they were doing. That's the thing. A lot of these people don't believe that, well, first they think they're smarter than you, okay? And they don't believe that you observe shit. And for me, as an empath, Spirit shows me shit. Like, whether I wanted to see it or not, Spirit will say, here, look at this. And I'm like, what am I looking at? And then I put it, and I might not even get it then. I'll just observe it and go, oh, okay. And then later on, Spirit's like, so did you understand what I was trying to show you? And then my mind will go to it. I'm like, wait a fucking minute. So that was just to piss me off. Man, go ahead with that shit. I gotta laugh, because I'm not... People don't realize when you go through this type of shit, people don't realize how strong you become. that you realize it ain't no point in showing up. It ain't no point in arguing with nobody. It ain't no point in being triggered and bothered. It ain't no point at all. All right. But you trusted what you were seeing. When they said they cared about you, but their actions didn't demonstrate care, you believed their actions over their words. When they claimed to want the relationship but constantly behaved in a way that prevented intimacy, you recognized the discrepancy. You didn't gaslight yourself into accepting their preferred narrative. You held on to your truth about what you were experiencing. This trust in your own perception while maintaining outward calm was sophisticated emotional work that the avoided person completely missed. They saw your lack of constant confrontation as evidence that you didn't notice the problem or didn't care enough to address them. They interpreted your strategic patience as naive tolerance. They mistook your careful observations for oblivious acceptance. This misreading allowed them to feel comfortable continuing their pattern because they believed you weren't sophisticated enough to see through them or strong enough to leave despite them. What you were also doing was giving them genuine opportunity to change or to reveal whether change was even possible. By not reacting to every withdrawal with panic or demands, you created space for them to potentially recognize their own patterns and choose to show up differently. By staying calm and grounded, you modeled secure attachment. That could have helped them feel safer if they were capable of learning from that modeling. By maintaining clear boundaries without constant drama, you demonstrated what healthy relationship behavior looks like. Listen, I've done this, and I was able to see that that person was unwilling or not capable of changing. I was like, oh, okay. So me modeling good things did not fruit good things because the person was not capable of doing good. At least not to me, right? So by maintaining clear boundaries without constant drama, you demonstrated what healthy relationship behavior looked like. You gave them every chance to rise to meet you in a healthier dynamic, not because you were naive about the likelihood of change, but because you wanted to know definitively whether change was possible before you're making your final decision about the relationship. Ooh, I could tell y'all some things. Throughout this entire process, you were also preparing yourself for the likely outcome. You recognize that avoidant patterns are deeply entrenched and rarely change without sustaining therapeutic work that most avoidants never undertake. You knew that an observation period would probably confirm this relationship couldn't provide what you need and that you will eventually need to leave. But you wanted to be certain, wanted to give the relationship and the person every fair chance, wanted to leave with no regrets about not trying hard enough or not understanding clearly enough. Your observation wasn't about naively hoping they would change. It was about thoroughly understanding what you were dealing with so that when you made your decision to stay or leave, that decision could be informed and confident rather than reactive and uncertain. The moment they realized you saw everything, the avoidant person's realization that you were never naive, that you saw and understood everything all along, typically arrives at a specific moment. She said, yep, I see you. Okay, wait. Did I scroll up? Or interaction that suddenly reveals the gap between how they perceived you and who you actually are. This moment of recognition is often shocking and disorienting for them because it requires them to completely revise their understanding of the relationship and their role in it. They realize they've been operating under false assumptions that gave them a sense of control and superiority. I can't even talk. Superiority that never actually existed. See, let me stop right there. That God complex that people got, where their ego is preceding them. They are prideful, right? And they just, I got this in the bag. You know what I'm saying? Collective ain't going nowhere. They dumb for me. They listen to me. They think I'm, the best thing since sliced bread. And don't know they a piece of moldy bread. Because all you doing is saying, oh, okay, so one piece of bread in that loaf mean the whole loaf is bad. But you have to be sure. You probably pulled through a couple pieces like, did it reach this? You know what? And then you realize, what am I doing? Let me just throw this whole bag away. Like, I can't eat this because there's mold in this bag. You get what I'm saying? So, you know how they say rotten fruit, next to other fruit will spoil a fruit? Well, this person is spoiled by whatever rotten thing that was in their life. It says they realize they've been operating under a false assumption that gave them a sense of control and superiority that never actually existed. I know I'm repeating. The moment of realization can happen in various ways, but the common thread is that something you say or do demonstrates such clear understanding of their patterns that they can no longer maintain the fiction that you were oblivious. One common trigger for this realization is when you finally articulate their patterns with such precision and clarity that they recognize you've been seeing everything all along. Perhaps after months of their hot and cold behavior, you calmly state, I've noticed that every time we get closer, every time I share something vulnerable or we have a particularly connected time together, you create distance within the next few days. You either pick a fight, suddenly get very busy, or find reasons why we're not compatible. This pattern has repeated at least 8 times in the 6 months we've been together. And it's happened so consistently that I can now predict it before it occurs. I had somebody in my life like that. I'd be like, you know what? We can't talk no more than every 3 weeks. And then you just fade to black. They're like, no, I don't. But yeah, you do. Every time. Anyway, so you say, I understand this is your way of managing anxiety about intimacy, but I can't continue in a relationship where closeness is consistently punished with withdrawal. This kind of statement, delivered with calm and clarity rather than emotional accusation, is devastating to the avoided person's perception of the dynamic. You have just demonstrated you've been tracking their patterns with precision. But you know what? Sometimes you say those things and it goes right over their head. And then sometimes you can't say nothing because they're not going to get it. Mm-hmm. You understand the psychological mechanism driving this behavior, that you've been making informed choices about staying despite seeing clearly what was happening. The specificity of your, I can't even talk tonight, but anyway, of your observation, the number of times you counted the pattern, the prediction, when you can now anticipate their behavior. All of this reveals that you've been studying them rather than confused by them. They be thinking that they studying you, y'all. They be swearing that they know your ups and downs, your patterns, your likes, your dislikes. They listen to everything you say. They know, you know what I'm saying? They know what you want and still won't give it to you. But then they think that they're the only ones observing. The calm delivery without emotional reactivity demonstrate that you've processed this information thoroughly and you're operating from clarity rather than on wounded attachment. Another trigger for the realization is when you demonstrate boundaries or make decisions that reveal you are never as invested or dependent as they assumed. Perhaps they executed perhaps they execute their typical withdrawal, expecting you to pursue or express anxiety about the distance, and instead, you respond with calm acceptance or with your own redirection of energy towards other areas of your life. Or perhaps they return after a period of withdrawal, expecting you to be relieved and immediately receptive. Instead, you tell them you've been doing a lot of thinking and you're not sure the relationship is sustainable, that you need to see sustained change before you're willing to continue investing. Done that too. I've done that too, y'all. This response reveals that you weren't desperately waiting for them to come back, that you used the distance to evaluate the relationship rather than to pine for them, that you have standards and limits they didn't realize existed. The avoided person realizes their absence didn't have the effect they unconsciously expected. Instead, making you more anxious and more grateful for their return, it gave you space to gain perspective and recognize that you deserve better. Y'all hear me? Y'all, you hear what I'm saying? You deserve better. This recognition forces them to see that you were more independent and less attached than they believe, that you've been making strategic choices rather than simply reacting to their patterns. Sometimes the realization comes when you reference specific moments or patterns in ways that reveal you were consciously noting them at a time, even though you didn't react visibly. Perhaps in a later conversation, you say something like, "Remember 3 months ago when I mentioned wanting to plan a trip together and you suddenly became very distant for 2 weeks? I understood at the time that the idea of future planning triggered your anxiety, but this is why I didn't push it. But I also noted as an important information about your capacity for commitment. This casual reference to a specific incident and your real-time understanding of it, despite not having confronted them about it at the time, it reveals at that time reveals that you've been maintaining mental record of their behavior and its meaning. The avoidant person often experiences realization with a mixture of emotions. There's a shock at discovering they completely misread you and the situation. There's embarrassment at recognizing their patterns were transparent rather than subtle. There's discomfort at losing the sense of control and superior understanding that they believe they had. There's respect or even attraction toward your demonstrated emotional intelligence and strategic thinking qualities. They value even though those qualities threaten them. And there's fear about what your clear understanding means for their ability to continue the pattern that makes them uncomfortable. Y'all. Y'all with me? This moment of realization is often includes the avoiding person's recognizing that many of their strategies were ineffective because you saw through them. The breadcrumbing was recognized as breadcrumbing. The mixed signals were understood as defense ambiguity. Okay? The withdrawal was identified as fear rather than legitimate need for space. The criticism and devaluation were seen as protective mechanisms rather than an accurate assessment. Every strategy they employed to maintain control and distance was operating on the surface level while you were operating on a deeper level of pattern recognition and psychological understanding. This recognition means they can no longer use these strategies effectively because the illusion of their subtlety has been destroyed. The realization is particularly powerful because it forces the avoided person to confront that you are making informed choices to stay and tolerate their behavior rather than staying out of ignorance or inability to leave. This means your eventual decision to leave, if you make that decision, cannot be dismissed as you finally seeing the light or recognizing that there was all there what was there all along. You saw it from the beginning. You chose to stay anyway, giving them opportunity to change. And now you're choosing to leave based on comprehensive evidence that change isn't happening. This informed choice is far more definitive. Okay? And harder for them to argue than with a decision based on sudden realization or emotional reaction. So, by you not making a sudden outburst of anger, and usually, that's when somebody could talk you off the ledge and say, come back, come back, come back, come back. I'm going to do better. You know what I'm saying? You can trust me. I'll do better, right? When you have an emotional outburst. But when you sit there and you take your time, and it's been months and days and years or whatever the case may be, you got some history with a person, it's far more concise why you are making the decision to let that shit go and move the fuck on. Listen, it might have been the hardest thing you could do to let somebody go, but Spirit said it might be a challenge, but it need to be done. Release. Because you know what you're releasing? Somebody who will leave you hanging, feeling all alone. You got to navigate tough situations with somebody that cannot or will not show up for you. That's not fair. So Spirit said, I know it's hard. It's okay. Cut him. Cut him. You got to cut him. Cut him off. All right. Now where was I? Yep. Falling back. I'm telling you, this transcends romantic relationship. This is for any kind of relationship in your life. I know brothers and sisters that do this. I know friends that do this. I know all parents that do this to people. You know, it's any kind of relationship, really. All right. This strategic silence served multiple functions that protected you, gave the avoidant person fair opportunity to change, and ultimately created conditions where your eventual decisions and statements would carry maximum impact. Understanding why silence was more powerful reveals sophisticated emotional intelligence that the avoided person completely underestimates until they realize what you've been doing. The first reason your silence was powerful is that it prevented you from becoming the problem in the avoidance person's narrative. If you had confronted every withdrawal with anxiety and pursuit, if you had created emotional scenes about their inconsistency, if you had demanded explanations and reassurance constantly, the avoiding person would have focused on your reactions rather than their patterns. They would have framed you as too needy, too demanding, too emotional, too unstable. Your behaviors would have become the justification for their withdrawal, allowing them to avoid examining their own patterns by making you the problem that needed to be managed or escaped. By remaining calm and not providing dramatic reactions for them to point to, you force the avoiding person to confront their patterns without the convenient distraction of your emotional reactivity. If issues arose in a relationship, they couldn't be blamed on your excessive responses because your responses were measured and reasonable. If they withdrew, they couldn't justify by claiming you were smothering them because you were giving them space. If the relationship felt uncomfortable to them, they had to sit with the possibility that their own discomfort with the intimacy was the problem, rather than blaming your behavior for creating pressure they needed to escape. Your silence also preserved your dignity and self-respect in ways that constant confrontation would have eroded. Every time you chose not to pursue when they withdrew, you maintained your sense of self-worth and your boundaries. Every time you observed their pattern without demanding explanation or reassurances, you demonstrated that you didn't need them to validate your perceptions or make you feel secure. Every time you stayed calm in the face of their inconsistency, you proved to yourself that you could maintain your center even when someone else was behaving in destabilizing ways. Let me pull that up so I can stop right there. So I'm not finished though. When I observed what that person did, I'm gonna tell y'all what they did. So we didn't follow each other on social media. And then one day they decided to follow me on one of their accounts. And in their account, they loaded some pictures maybe like 2 days before following me. I believe it was done in a way that if I observed the picture that I was supposed to be pissed, upset, or whatever. But it was just a confirmation for me, right? For them, I don't know if it was subconscious or conscious, the choice that they made. But I realized, oh, this person is trying to play in my face again. Like every chance they get, they try to play in my face. But you came for me. I didn't come for you. You understand what I'm saying? You came for me. You sent for me. I didn't send for you. And people need to, you know, folks need to do something safe. Because when you go through what I just read, and I haven't even finished yet, and you've gained that self-worth, that type of shit don't bother you the same way it might have earlier in the relationship when you realize, oh, wait, hold on, that's a problem for me, right? It becomes something that confirms why you're not fucking with them to begin with. It becomes confirmation why you made the decision to cut the cords, even if it was hard. What, that you block them, or you don't trust them because they lie or whatever they do. They don't realize they sitting there playing God with this God complex they got, sitting there thinking they nana and the boo boo, they know more than you, and you're like, well, if you feel like that, go on with your life. I'm glad you enjoy. I'm glad you enjoy it. Leave me out of it. I don't need to see it. I don't really care. Not like that. If I did care, you would know. And it's not even on some, I mean, just be nonchalant. It's more like, ew, don't, I mean, it's triangulation is what I'm describing, but they don't realize, or some of them do realize that's what they're doing because they're trying to pull a reaction out of you. Especially if you haven't given them any reaction in a minute, they need that. They feed off of that. Narcissistic people are very vampiric in that they need that reaction from you. That fuels them. So if you react in any kind of way that they can observe, then ha. You know what I'm saying? Aha, they got you. And, some of them want to see you suffer. That's the other sad part about it. It's like people do that shit thinking that they going to hurt your feelings, and then they going to see a reaction. And they can sit back and watch the reaction and get fed off of that. But when somebody put you through what I just read, when you go through that with somebody, after a while, you become numb to the bullshit because you know that this is who they are. This is their behavior. This is this type of shit that they do. You know what I'm saying? They like to provoke. Okay? They like to provoke reaction on some passive aggressive shit sometimes. And sometimes not so passive, more aggressive. Your job is not to be bothered by that because that's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. All right, so the strategic silence also, okay, wait. This preservation of self-control is powerful. Oh, I'm sorry, self is powerful because it means you emerge from the relationship stronger than diminished, clearer rather than confused, and confident rather than destroyed. I just described that without reading that. Anyway, the strategic silence also gives the avoided person genuine opportunity to show up differently without the pressure that constant confrontation creates. When you confront avoided patterns consistently, you trigger the very defenses you're trying to address. The avoided person feels pressured and attacked, which activates their need to create distance and their defensiveness about their behavior. But when you remain silent while observing, you create space where change could happen organically if the person were capable of it. Your silence said, I'm giving you room to recognize your patterns and choose differently without making every moment a confrontation about what you're doing wrong. Like I feel like we don't need to tell grown folks how to act. To be honest, they're gonna act how they want to act. Let them. You know what I'm saying? This generous space meant that if they didn't change, you knew definitively that change wasn't possible even under the most favorable conditions. Your silence was also powerful because it was not a passive acceptance. but an active choice. You weren't silent because you didn't know what to say, or because you were afraid of confrontation. You were silent because you consciously chose observation and data rather gathering over reactive confrontation. This intentional quality to your silence meant you were in control of your response rather than being controlled by their behavior. You were choosing how to engage rather than simply reacting to what they did. This control is power that the avoidant person didn't recognize you had until they realized you had been making strategic choices all along. The silence. The silence accumulated power over time in ways that the individual confrontations never could. Each instance of you noting their pattern without reacting, each moment of you seeing through their defenses without calling them out, each choice to stay calm while they enacted their dysfunction, all of these accumulated to comprehensive understanding and documented record of their behavior. When you eventually chose to speak, when you finally articulated what you've been seeing, the accumulated weight of all those observations gave your words devastating impact. You weren't reacting to a single incident. You weren't presenting comprehensive case built on months of evidence. I'm sorry, you were presenting, sorry. Oh, God, the context. Like, share, and subscribe, y'all. When class is in session, you will know about it if you ring that bell. Okay? All right. Oh, and like, sharing, and subscribing are energetic donations to the channel, and they are very much welcome, and we are grateful. Okay, you were presenting comprehensive case. See, that's why I can't read it right, because they grammatically left out a word. You were presenting a comprehensive case built on months of evidence, and this comprehensive case was impossible to dismiss or minimize. The silence was so powerful because it revealed who the avoided person truly was rather than who they might have performed being if they had known you were watching critically. You know what it is, too? People send their representative to you, and you fall for the representative, right? And when you fall for the representative, the thing is, the mask eventually comes off. When the mask comes off, you realize, oh, shit, that is not what I thought this was. And that's what makes you start watching, because, like, wait, that mask slipped off. Was that what I saw? And that's when you guys start gathering that data, because, you know what I'm saying, you fall for that person, you thinking, okay, their potential was all right. You know, this might be something. Then they quickly show you, no, it ain't. Psych your mind. When people know they're being observed and evaluated, they often modify their behavior. The mask goes back on to create a better impression. But because the avoiding person believed you weren't critically observing, they showed you their authentic patterns without self-awareness or modification they might have employed if they'd known you were taking notes. They revealed their true capacity, their actual patterns, their genuine limitations, all while believing you weren't sophisticated enough to recognize what you were seeing. Let me tell you something about quantum physics, too. Damn, I can't think of the name of that movie, but something about the rabbit hole. And Morgan Freeman's in it. And they did some experiment with quantum physics where they were launching a tennis ball through a tennis ball launcher or a ball launcher, whatever. When that tennis ball was being observed with a camera, it altered and it moved a certain way. I believe when the camera was removed, okay, from the sphere of what was happening, the ball started to move, I think, randomly, but it changed its pattern. So even inanimate objects are aware of being observed. People can feel you observing. Sometimes you do have to play dumb and just let people be. You know what I'm saying? That way you can see what they want to be. All right. This authentic revelation gave you accurate information that you wouldn't have gotten if they had known to perform better. Your silence also protected you from the exhaustion that constant confrontation creates, like the drama. Oh my God. Can you imagine confronting somebody every time they did something? You know they did it and they just gonna lie, lie, lie? Addressing every pattern, every withdrawal, every mixed signal would have consumed an enormous amount of emotional energy and would have made the relationship even more difficult than it already was. By choosing your battles, by staying silent about the individual incidents while observing the larger patterns, you preserve your energy for the bigger decisions and conversations that actually mattered. You weren't worn down by constant conflict, which meant when you did choose to speak or leave, you had the energy and clarity to do so powerfully. Okay, I'm sorry, which meant when you did choose to speak or to leave, you had the energy and the clarity to do so powerfully. The power of your silence is also evident in how it positioned you when you finally chose to speak, because you hadn't been constantly confronting their patterns, because you hadn't been pursuing or creating drama. Your eventual articulation of what you had seen carried enormous weight. The avoidant person couldn't dismiss it as more of your usual emotional reactions because it wasn't usual. It was the first time you were laying out comprehensively what you have been observing. And the calm precision with which you did was also shocking and undeniable. Now, I'm going to just interject with that and say sometimes we do have several conversations with people about adjusting their behavior, about what's acceptable and what's not. But the fact that we stick around makes them feel comfortable to keep doing it. The thing is, when you start to observe and you hold back a little bit, you start to realize, oh, okay. If I react like this, they react. Like you start playing chess in your head because you realize this person is playing games. And they keep thinking, if I move this way, you're going to move that way, until you realize you don't want to move that way. Until you realize that. Your silence had been gathering power, and when you finally released that power through clear articulation of their patterns, the impact was devastating to their perception of the dynamic, and their sense of control were changes where they had never, oh, where the changes, when they had never, when they discovered, excuse me, I can't even talk, when they discovered they had never had the upper hand. The avoiding person's discovery that you were observing everything all along, that you were never as naive or unaware as they believed, fundamentally changes the dynamic in their perception of both you and the relationship. The discovery shatters several key assumptions that they operate under. And the recalibration that follows is that follows this shattering reveal new truth about the relationship's actual power dynamics and future possibilities. Understanding what changes when they realize they never had the upper hand illuminates both how relationships with avoidance function and what happens when the illusion of their control is destroyed. The first major change is that the avoidant person can no longer maintain the comfortable belief that you are too attached or too invested to leave. One of the ways avoidants maintain their sense of safety in a relationship is by believing that they're the less invested party, the one who could leave at any time, the one who has more power because they need the relationship less. Your apparent naive, I can't even talk, or tolerance of their pattern confirm this belief. If you were naive enough to see what they were doing, you must be invested enough to accept whatever they offered. Again, if you're around them, they just assume you accept it because you're around. But discovering that you saw everything means you are making informed choices to stay, which means you could also make an informed choice to leave. This recognition strips away their sense of security that comes from believing you are more trapped in the relationship than they are. The loss of perceived power often triggers anxiety in an avoidant person that manifests in various ways. Some avoidants respond with increased pursuit, suddenly demonstrating more interest and investment as they recognize you might actually leave. This pursuit is driven by fear of loss rather than increased capacity for intimacy, which means it's typically it typically won't be sustained once they feel secure in your availability again. So basically, once they feel like they got you, you know what I'm saying, they go back to the same bullshit. Other avoidants respond with defensive withdrawal, protecting themselves from the vulnerability of recognizing they care more than they realize, or that they might actually lose something important. Still, others respond with anger or accusations, attacking you for deceiving them by not revealing what you are seeing, projecting their discomfort onto you rather than examining their own behavior. The second major thing is that the avoidant person must confront their patterns. That their patterns were transparent rather than subtle or justified. When they believe you didn't notice their patterns, they could maintain fiction. The fiction that the patterns were reasonable responses to circumstances. That their withdrawal was a legitimate need for space rather than defense avoidance. That their inconsistency was due to external factors rather than internal conflicts about intimacy. But once they realize you saw through all of it, that you recognize the patterns as defensive mechanisms driven by attachment wounds, they can no longer hide behind justifications and rationalizations. They are forced to see themselves as you've been seeing them, as someone whose fear drives them to hurt people who care about them, whose defenses prevent genuine intimacy, whose patterns are predictable and dysfunctional rather than mysterious and justified. Because like I said, with that God complex, they be swearing, listen, they to cast me out and everybody wants them, including you. This confrontation with their patterns is deeply uncomfortable, and many avoidants will resist it by either doubling down on their justifications or by exiting a relationship to escape the discomfort of being truly seen. The avoidant who can sit with this discomfort, who can acknowledge their patterns without becoming defensive, are the rare ones who might actually be capable of change. But most avoidants will choose to protect their self-image over confronting their dysfunction, which means they'll find ways to discount your observations or leave before they have to fully sit with what you're reflecting back onto them. The third change is the power dynamic shift dramatically once both people acknowledge that the awareness was always mutual. When the avoidant person believes they were operating at a level of sophistication you couldn't perceive, they felt powerful and in control. But discovering that you were actually operating at a deeper level of understanding than they were, that you were seeing not just their behaviors, but the psychological mechanisms driving those behaviors, shifts powers decidedly in your direction. You understand them better than they understand themselves in many ways. You've been 3 steps ahead of them throughout their relationship. This recognition is both threatening and, for some avoidants, attractive. They value intelligence and perception, and discovering that you possess these qualities in abundance forces them to respect that you. I can't even talk. Forces them to respect you, even as that respect threatens their sense of control. This power shift often results in the avoided person threatening you differently, with more caution. Treating you differently. Oh my God, I'm about to be done, y'all. I'm tired. With more caution, more respect, or sometimes with more distance, as they recognize you are not someone they can easily manipulate or mislead. They realize their typical strategies won't work with you because you see through them. See, now they know the veil is done. They recognize that you make decisions based on comprehensive understanding rather than on emotional reactivity or naive hope. This recognition can lead to more genuine relating if the avoidant person is capable of it, or can lead to their exit. Hold on, y'all. Hold on. All right, I'm back. Sorry. All right. This recognition can lead to more genuine relating if the avoidant person is capable of it, or it can lead to their exit as they may seek out someone new who hasn't yet seen through their pattern and who might be easier to keep at a safe distance. The fourth change is that the relationship's future becomes clearer and less ambiguous. When both people acknowledge that you've been seeing everything all along, there's less room for the avoidant person to maintain ambiguity. I can't even talk, y'all. Ambiguity. I know the word, can't talk. Mixed signals that characterize their approach to relationships. Ambiguity. I cannot talk tonight. Anyway, you've demonstrated that you understand exactly what's happening and what the patterns mean, which means they can no longer hide behind the claims of miscommunication or different interpretations. The choice becomes stark. Either they acknowledge their patterns and commit to changing them through sustained work, or they acknowledge the change is impossible and a relationship cannot continue. This clarity is uncomfortable for the avoiders who prefer ambiguity. There you go. Now it rolled off my tongue. But it's necessary for any genuine resolution. The discovery that you were never naive also changes what kinds of conversations and interactions are possible going forward. The avoidant person can no longer gaslight you about your perceptions or convince you that you're reading too much into their behavior. They can't minimize their patterns or suggest you're being too sensitive. They have to engage with you as someone who understands attachment theory, recognizes defense mechanisms, and makes informed assessments based on behavioral evidence rather than words and promises. This requirement for genuine engagement rather than surface level interaction is foreign to most. Avoidance and many will choose to. Is foreign, and most avoidance and many will choose to exit over the discomfort of having to operate at this level of honesty and self awareness. What ultimately changes is that the relationship can no longer continue on the terms that made it comfortable for the avoidant person. They can no longer employ their usual strategies while believing that you don't see what they're doing. they can't they can't hide no more. They can't bullshit you no more. They can no longer maintain control through keeping you confused or off balance. They can no longer rely on your naive hope or attachment to keep you tolerating their patterns indefinitely. The relationship must either evolve into something more genuine and reciprocal, which requires the avoidant person to change in ways most cannot or will not, or it must end because the conditions that allowed it to exist in its dysfunctional form have been destroyed by your revelation of always have seen exactly what was happening. This binary outcome change genuinely or indefinitively is precisely this binary outcome. Why? Wait a minute. It's precisely what your strategic observation and eventual articulation creates. It's the only path forward that serves your dignity and need for genuine relationship rather than enabling a dynamic built on your supposed ignorance of what you were always seeing clearly. So basically, they can't front with you no more. They can't lie, they can't hide, they can't ghost, they can't gaslight, they can't breadcrumb, they can't love bomb, they can't do all of those things and you don't see what it is. So there are people who will, how you put this, they will turn the other cheek just to have the person in their life. Or they don't challenge the person to be better. Those are the people they typically end up being with. Like karmic and another karmic, right? Those people typically don't challenge each other to change, to grow, to be better. One person, in order to split that dynamic up, has to make a concerted effort, not just a thought, but an actual action, right? And when it comes to that, that's the type of person that they may go toward somebody either that doesn't know their patterns or doesn't challenge them on their patterns. But you, on the other hand, if you are the person that I've been talking about all tonight, you would rather cut that off than to stay attached to somebody who would leave you hanging. You know what I'm saying? There's no other way. I didn't even need to pull another card tonight because this entire spread read it out. Okay? You don't need anybody in your life that cannot transform. They cannot go through the metamorphosis. They can't go through evolution, illumination, go through an awakening, emerge different, and transcend their current set of circumstances. Because if they don't, there's no, I don't think there's a relationship you can have when a person is not able to throw that veil up. They can't, if they can't gaslight you and lie about what they're doing or how they're doing it, because you already know, and now you know that I know, and I know that you know. Well, there's nothing to lie about, really, because it's right there in your face. Every time y'all get close, intimate, or whatever, and they feel something, they pull back, they run away, they can't handle it, right? And then there's others who will, will tell you they're gonna change, but then they can't perform the change. Take how I resonate, but some people are they just can't handle you after that point. So they'll pull away instead. Maybe they'll observe you from a distance or whatever, but nothing's going to change the situation once you reveal what you know. And some people, I will say, when they stay quiet, they don't reveal what they know because they still just want that person or whatever capacity they can have that person in. But that definitely erodes that self-worth that we talked about. Because you don't have no business being with somebody you cannot trust. Because you can't trust them. They will not surprise you. Literally. They can't surprise you. When they go off and do some F-boy, F-girl stuff, right? And then make you feel bad. I'll give you an example. So, we have some married friends who got married, I think, a year after us. So they were married. Oh, no, we got two sets of friends married. One made it. I think the divorce was final at 23 years. And the other one, I guess their divorce was final probably 23 years into their relationship, maybe 20, 23, 24, something like that. But here's the key thing. The first one I mentioned that was just married, that, got the divorce exactly at 23 years. He was an alcoholic, the husband. He was an alcoholic before they got married. He remained miserable. His mom stayed with them. She was the alcoholic before him. I don't know if dad drank. I mean, he had a relationship with him, but I don't know. All I know is every holiday was, I'm going to stop drinking on such and such a day. I'm going to stop drinking on Christmas. I'm going to stop drinking on Valentine's Day. I'm going to stop drinking on my birthday, And all those days for all those years came and went. And this ex-friend of ours, I would say, she had a very miserable existence with him. If it wasn't, she felt obligated because he paid her way through nursing school. Or I don't know if he paid her way or supported her throughout nursing school. So she actually is a successful nurse. She has two children. He has two children. But they have one together. And so they stay together for the child, which is really messing her. She really messed up by it now. And, it was sad because 23 years of her life, he ruined their finances, ruined the house. Like he just went down. He was originally the breadwinner, but he couldn't get that monkey off his back. And she saw it, but she didn't do anything about it. She looked the other way. Then the other relationship I'm going to tell you about is he was a whore from the beginning. They were dating since they were both 16. And this man, young man at the time, always had a slew of women that just, oh, he's so handsome, he's so handsome, he's so handsome. So she always knew that some woman wanted a piece of him. And in their relationship, somehow, she accepted the fact that I would say she accepted it because she didn't do anything to put demands on him to stop cheating. He would cheat. He cheated from East Coast to West Coast. Finally made a baby that she didn't find out about till the child was 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere around there. And then she called for a divorce because he had finally embarrassed her in a transparent way, meaning everybody knew he was a bit of a hoe, but he didn't have no child from nobody. The moment he had a child, all bets was off. The complete relationship changed. So there are people out there that will accept that just to have somebody in their life. And there are people like myself, I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at you. I don't want to be around you. No, no, no. You betrayed me. I can't do it. And we not going to get to the point of having no kids. Like, the betrayal that, like what I'm describing, has been why can't I talk? Why can't I talk, Spirit? That control situation between them and the cheating or whatever had been happening since they were 16, since they got into a relationship. So he never became anything he wasn't already. And it's not that he was incapable of changing. There was no circumstance presented to him to change, meaning I'm going to leave you alone, I'm done with you, and going by her life. She never did that. Maybe she tried it or it didn't last, but I don't know. All I know is they remained together until they weren't. You got to ask yourself, for the sake of your self-worth, what category do you fall in? Will you go ahead and be with somebody for the sake of having them? Or will you choose you and your own self-worth? For one, I choose me every time. Why? Because you're not going to play in my face. I see it. We finally come to an understanding that I got certain standards, in that in order to be in my life, here are the standards you must comply with. And you choose not to comply, and I'm going to still be like, oh, okay, well, I know I gave you those standards, but, you can still... No. No, no, no. So y'all take that how it resonates. If it don't resonate, it's cool. You know what I'm saying? This was just a class to help you understand the dynamics that some people go through with others that are avoidant, not vulnerable in relationships because of whatever their past wounding is, how it would impact the both of you, and how you should potentially handle it calmly when you recognize your own self-worth and that what they're doing is a reflection of them and not your fault. Or at least don't make it their fault, right? All right, so I appreciate y'all coming to the live. Both of them? Damn, girl. Ooh, child. Well, I guess you're going to be moving beyond that veil then and doing something different. I'm sure of that. Because that is a lot. I mean, and they both separately, one is alcohol and one isn't. I was like, really? You are really like gonna marry this dude? She was like, yeah. I said, you're not gonna go to, counseling with the pastor or something? No. Okay. I took her out to lunch with I just wanted to talk to her, just say, listen, maybe you should think about this differently. He don't want anybody in his business. I was like, oh my God. And then on the wedding day, I'm a usher, and she don't want to get out the car, the wedding car. Well, mama can't even get her out the car. I was like, you gotta go, you gotta make your decision. You gonna tell him yes or no? But whatever the case may be, stop crying in that wedding dress and decide what you're gonna do. She married him. 23 years later. Yep. And you know what's crazy? Like they said, when you read about this type of person or personality type, right? You start to realize this is a very well documented personality type. And once you understand that, it makes it a little easier to understand that where this comes from has nothing to do with you, because this is how people who are wounded in a very specific and harsh way respond to love. And if they don't get therapeutic help, 9 times out of 10, there's nothing about them that's going to change. And like the guy I was saying, the first guy, that's the alcoholic, he a fixed sign. I just was like, this Negro ain't gonna change. He's not gonna change. And she was his fifth, fifth or sixth fiance. He kept trying to engage other women, and they kept turning him down. Now, was he a bad looking guy? No, he wasn't bad looking, but he had some ways, and I think the other women dodged the bullet, and she got caught in the net. You know what I'm saying? The other ones dodged the bullet, or I should say, dodged the fishing rod. He was able to reel her in. And I think it made it easier for him to reel her in because she had problems at home with her mom. Her mom was very mentally unstable. So, I could generally say that my friend, and we still, I mean, we're associates now. We're not enemies. I've seen her come, she come to my house, barbecue, all that. But we see each other maybe once in a blue moon. But when we were hot and heavy friends, her mom was on some kick you out, kick you out, kick you out type nonsense. And this child was not like, didn't deserve it. It's just the mother was so mentally unstable that whenever it suits her, she would just kick this girl out. So it put her in a vulnerable situation with somebody who was more of a predator looking for the prey, and he was able to reel her in. Mm. And it took her 23 years to extract herself from that relationship. That's 23 too long for me. Ain't no fucking way. Ain't no motherfucking way. Now she glowing now. She got unattached to him. She is glowing. Because at one point I was like, she drinking too. Every time I looked at her on social media, she got a drink in her hand. And I'm starting to see the age. And she really has some good skin. So I was like, You know how they say he's starting to crack. But ever since, it's like she got new facials or something. She might even have them. But she looks so much better without him. And he, on the other hand, went completely gray in his early 40s. Back hurt, can't work. He would come into large sums of money only to blow it, making bad decisions. I don't know what happened, but that alcohol tore him up. See, yes, queen. Yup. So, them parents, like when you don't come from a stable environment, it makes it that much easier for someone to prey on you or take advantage of you, for you to be naive for a while. I don't think she was naive completely. I think she was initially, right? But I felt like what it was is that sometimes we justify the relationship because one, we might not be able to go back to certain circumstances. There's also some good in it, like he was like the breadwinner, right? So that allowed her to go to nursing school. So yeah, and it's hard to recognize stability when all you know is chaos. You right about that, Aya? Because I'm sorry, Veronica, because her mother created the conditions that made being in a relationship with a man like that acceptable. Now she's going to have to run back to mom. He takes care of all the bills. She's able to go to school. She's to be able to become a nurse. Now, when you become a nurse, that job is high demanding, right? There's a lot of learning curve. There's a lot of experience you need. So there's less of I can pay attention to what's going on with him because I got to go to work now. And one thing he said over and over and over and over again, I'll never forget it. When she got become a nurse, she gonna take care of me. And I'm thinking, but you able body and nothing wrong with you. Why would you keep saying that? And then he turned around, got a back surgery, and became more incapacitated to work and everything else. And she very much did have to take care of him for a minute. I said, couldn't be me. So when she made the decision, I celebrated. I celebrated for her that she is free from that heavy weight and heavy burden of that. I mean, he ruined their finances to the where I think their house. They moved into this area. Now we both from the same area, about 45 minutes of the way. Away. They moved down here before we did, and we didn't know. I think we ran into them and realized, oh shit, you down here? And they had bought a big house. I forgot what it was worth, but a big house would have been worth a couple pennies, like maybe like 3 and a quarter, something like that in the threes, way back in the late 90s. And so it should have been worth money. It wasn't worth shit by the time they got a divorce because he ruined their finances. She couldn't get nothing out of it. And I don't know if that was by design or he was his incompetence, but that was a costly divorce for her. A costly situation to be with somebody all of those years, knowing that you really shouldn't be with them no more. Or you probably should have never got into it, but here you are. Ooh, doesn't beat you, he's a keeper. Ooh, I'm glad nobody told me that. Wow. I'm glad you did. Because that is bad programming. That is like a malfunction. Shit. Then the other one, they got 3 kids. He has 4 though. He had a child by somebody, and he didn't want to even be with the girl. He don't even like the girl. But now the girl's living in his house with his parents and him with the child because she ain't really got no place to be. I don't know. It's messy, but they divorced. He pays his alimony or child support or whatever. I think all the kids are technically grown. Yeah, no, they're all grown in college type stuff. So I think the oldest don't even deal with him at all because how close he is to the mom. The other 2, I think they tolerate him or they love him. They love their father. But, it's just a sad state of affairs. But mom, the mother, put herself in that situation and she didn't have to. Her circumstances had nothing to do with being abused or mentally abused at home. She just desired this man, wanted this man, didn't really want no other person to have this man in that way, and she chose to look the other way. So now she bitter. My husband sees her sometimes when he's in the area where they from. And he's like, she just looks so bad and she looked bitter. Well, yeah, because she mad her. She should be mad at herself. He's the one that was always presenting himself as he was. She was deciding to choose differently or believe differently. And that don't make no sense. That don't get us nowhere. That was her only dating advice. Aya, I'm trying to think. I don't think my mama gave me any dating advice, like at all. Which would make sense how I led me into a domestic violence relationship, but I got out of that quick because of the fact that it wasn't normal. It wasn't something I was used to. It didn't make no sense. And so I grew up having a very toxic whole father. That was my dating advice, not to date somebody like him. My abuser wasn't like that. But I had to grow up realizing I couldn't be like him. I mean, I couldn't date nobody like him. Hell, I didn't want nobody of my nationality because of him. Okay. All right, y'all. I've been on here 89 minutes. That's long enough. I appreciate y'all, though. Thank you for rocking with me tonight in the class. I'll have another one. I'll try to make sure I get one a little different the next time I come on. Again, I don't know what Wednesday night gonna look like. Again, um, it depends on how my prep for food goes tomorrow. Um, I may be jerking some turkey. I have done that before. I might jerk turkey again, and maybe on the grill. All depends. I don't know. What y'all cooking? Oh, thank you for coming. I'm glad you liked it. I hope it was helpful. You know what I'm saying? Identifying what people need to identify for their relationships because, we get into situations, we don't know how we get here. And then when we do step back and observe, we can make really informed decisions in a comfortable space with less attachment. And shit. Spirit proved that with the cards that came out tonight as I pulled. Tricks up their sleeves, spiritual bay, energy cutting. I'm sorry, blocked, energy cord cutting, and left hanging. And the transformation is the only way. This transforms everything, or there's nothing. Cranberry glazed corned beef and roasted veggie every year. I never had cranberry. Send me some. Cranberry glaze. I love corned beef. I haven't had it in a very long time. But my mom raised me off of it. She used to make it every St. Patrick's Day like we were Irish. Oh, you know what? I might be. But not technically, but we might have came from all the same Irish plantation. Anywho, I'm gonna let y'all go. Thank you for coming again. I appreciate y'all. I will see y'all. We'll see tomorrow. If not, definitely Thursday. All right. Peace, y'all. And I'm sorry about last night. I had some obligations. Spirit kept me busy in another direction. I feel like they was pulling me off the table for a reason, but we'll know. Good night.